part, and I didn't get to the end, but when you get to the end, you really see the connection, because right after that, he swears that he won't be wroth with them.
Yeah, right.
Again.
Yeah.
And then he connects that thought to, I'll never remove the covenant of peace. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So he's clearly distinguishing the time when his wrath was revealed, the time when his face was hidden, was from Mount Sinai to Jesus. Right. And then he talks about there's a new covenant coming, and that covenant will be my covenant of peace, and I swear I will never go back to the system where my face is hidden from you. I will never go back to the system of the animal sacrifices. I will never go back to the system where only one can know me. And then only once a year they can come into the holiest place. I'm never turning away from the system where my spirit has now been poured out in all flesh, and anybody who wants intimacy with me can come smack dab up into my presence and stand face to face with me and have intimacy with me. I'm never going back to that system. And that's what the whole context of that is. They were barren through their union to the flesh. He gives the law, and a little wrath I hid my face from you. That's the giving of the law. They're barren from Mount Sinai all the way to the cross. The reason why they're barren is because they can't see the grace in God's eyes, and so they're not having intimacy with him through the spirit of grace, but they're having intimacy with the flesh through the spirit of works. And so they're barren. They're dead in that place. And here's the thing. When did God find Israel? When they were in bondage to Egypt. Okay? Ezekiel talks about this. He says, I walked by you when you were in your blood, and behold, it was the time of love. And I said, live, live. And so what God did was he came and found the least of all the people in the whole world. They were considered slaves. They were in bondage to Pharaoh. They were in bondage to death, in bondage to sin. And what God said is, I'm going to take these people that are the least of all people, and I'm going to take them by the hand. I'm going to claim them as my own. I'm going to wash them off. I'm going to deliver them from this bondage. I'm going to betroth myself to them. I'm going to spread my skirt over them. I'm going to dress them with gold and silver and fine linen. I'm going to make them my wife. And through me exalting them to be the greatest nation in the world, that will glorify me and my grace in the eyes of all the other nations. And then they'll come to me also. So what we wanted to do was to demonstrate his goodness towards human beings, the arm of his grace, and what the arm of his grace will do inside the life of a people. So he said, let me take the people that are the worst off, and then I'll take those people and make them the greatest of all people. And then that will glorify me and my heart for people. That will glorify my grace in the eyes of people, and then that will bring all the nations to me. Yes. Right? Yeah. And so Israel was barren because none of the nations came to God through Israel, because Israel wasn't busy revealing the goodness of God, because they weren't trusting in his grace. They were trusting in their flesh. Yeah. So he says, sing, O ye that were barren, for your seed will inherit the Gentiles. And so what God did was he took Jesus. Now Jesus takes the sin and death of the whole universe onto himself, and he's hanging on the cross. He looks like the least of all people, doesn't he? Yep. Says he's like a root out of dry ground. Yeah. We looked at him and we didn't see anything of beauty to behold. We didn't think that there was anything to esteem in him. We didn't think he was the Son of God. We thought he was a worm. We thought he was smitten and stricken of God. He certainly was the greatest of all sinners. Look at it. And so God, he's Israel. That's who he is. He is Israel. And so what did God do? He comes and takes a guy that looks like the guy who's the most cursed that could ever be, and he takes that guy, he raises that guy up from the dead and seats that guy at his right hand. Mm-hmm. And so now God is glorified in the eyes of all people through this one man that was in bondage to sin and death. And then we see what God wants to do with the life of a human being who's in bondage to sin and death. We see God's goodness towards a human being in bondage to sin and death. We see God's intentions towards a human being in bondage to sin and death. We see the beauty of God's thoughts towards a human being in bondage to sin and death. And we see the strength of God's arm, of God's grace to take a human being who was in hell and now take that guy and seat him inside of the Godhead. Now, what that does is that glorified God in all of our eyes. Yes. We're now in awe Not just of his goodness to us, but we're in awe of his wondrous work and the might of his arm.
Yes.
So now God's been glorified in our eyes, the eyes of the Gentiles and the nations, through this man Jesus, who is of the seed of David according to the flesh. And so he will inherit all of the nations, right?
Yeah.
On behalf of Israel. And so Israel will no longer be barren. And it's not just talking physical Israel there. It's talking about God's idea of Israel, right? Which was that you have many people from both nations, right? And now that Israel will not be barren or fruitless because of the firstborn from the dead, Jesus.
Matthew 28, right?
Yeah. The firstborn from the dead, Jesus.
Yeah.
And that, see, and this connects to what Paul's talking about in Romans 9, where he says, when he talks about, cannot the potter use the clay any way that he likes? He's not saying that he made them reject him. He's not saying that he makes some and they don't have a choice but to reject him. He's saying, can I use my creation any way that I like? Meaning, if I make a people to reveal my glory, but they harden their heart to me, can I not also then use their hardened heart to also reveal my glory?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't make them harden their heart, but them hardening their heart cannot stop me from revealing my glory.
That's good.
See, he didn't fashion them to harden their heart.
Right.
He didn't fashion them in a way to make them harden their heart. What he's saying is, in that I'm the creator, am I not able to just use everything to reveal my glory?
Right.
So I didn't intend for them to harden their heart to me, but in that they did, can I not still use their hardened heart to reveal my glory? Most certainly I can. Because their heart is hardened to my grace, when I come in the flesh, they won't see that I'm God, and they'll crucify me.
Wow.
So he took their hardened heart to still reveal his glory. And that's what he did with Pharaoh. He didn't make Pharaoh harden his heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart the first time, it said. And so, cannot God use Pharaoh's hardened heart to reveal his glory?
Yeah.
Absolutely he
Yes,
can.
he can.
The more you speak grace to a guy with a hardened heart, the more hard their heart's going to get. The more they're going to reject it.
Yeah.
The more you speak grace to a guy who's full-blown set on his works, the angrier he's going to get. The more his heart's going to get hard. So the more Jesus sat with the sinners and talked about God his Father, the more he talked like him being a human being was equal with God, the more angry the people who were filled with works became.
Yeah.
How can you make yourself out equal to God? And if you're thinking about being equal with God based on your works, yes, how can you make yourself out to be equal with God?
Right.
How can you call God Father?
Right.
And so God used their hardened heart to still reveal his glory because of their hardened heart, they crucified the King of Kings. God was able to reveal his glory by coming and raising that guy up from the dead. So, Israel couldn't get in the way of him revealing his glory. He was going to use them, one or the other.
Right.
Whichever way he likes it. And that's what Paul is talking about in Romans 9. He's not saying that God makes people reject him against their will.
Yeah.
He's saying God can use a person to reveal his goodness whether they've rejected him or not. He's not just confined to using people who believe in him. He can use people who don't believe in him to reveal his glory, i.e. all the Pharisees.
Sure.
They didn't believe in him, and he still used them to reveal his glory. How? They rejected God so much that they actually killed him when he came in the flesh. God was able to use that to reveal his glory because he came and raised the Son up.